Hi, folks. Welcome to The Creative Nomad, presented by TrueAwesomeLife.com. I'm your host, JP Adkins, and I created this podcast because I want to tell the stories of the radicals, the ones who are out there making the world a better, more beautiful place, the amazing authors, artists, musicians, thought leaders, coaches, and yes, nomads who are out there living their true awesome lives and want to help others do the same. Are you ready to live your true awesome life? Go to TrueAwesomeLife.com and start your journey today. And hello, everyone. Thanks for listening to The Creative Nomad. Today we are here with Kirby Ingles, and he's a leadership and transformation coach who has been working with really shifting the conversation from what's wrong with these men to what's right with these men. And he's doing some really amazing work. He's been a veteran. He is a veteran. He's not been a veteran. He is a veteran. And, you know, I just really want to get out his message. So, Kirby, where are you in the world?
So, yeah, I'm in South Central Missouri. So if you were to travel down Interstate 44 between St. Louis and Joplin, Missouri, I would be right smack dab in the middle of the Ozarks, real close to the Mark Twain National Forest. So there are more trees than there are people here where I am at. And so I am way down here in southern Missouri.
Oh, that's really cool. So what made you pick there of all places?
What made me decide here was this was the last stomping ground for me in the military. So I'm here right now, and we are actually looking to move back towards the Kansas City region, which is where my wife's from, and get back up in that area, probably North Kansas City region. And that's where me and my wife met, and then that's where she lived out most of her, life. And as a person in the military, I've moved around about 10 times as a kid and about another 10 times while I was in the military. And so home is wherever my family is, and I hang my hat. So it's not that big of a deal for me.
I got it. I got that. And, I admire people that can do that. I'm a gypsy myself, so it's kind of fun. But so what got you into coaching? What started that conversation for you?
Yeah, so I would say around sometime between the years of 2008 and 2012. I remember vividly because I was in Washington, D.C. I had just moved there, and I was an HR manager working for the Army, and I just wasn't happy with the way things were. I just had lost a little bit of sense of purpose in my job, and it's not because I didn't appreciate serving in the Army, but I was at the level that I was at. I was spending more time in meetings, writing policy and managing people rather than actually working with the consumer or the client. And I was just a little frustrated. I just didn't want to, go back through corporate America, and work, right up the chain again, or sit in a cubicle, or do any of those things. And so I really had to kind of do some deep soul searching and figure out, okay, what is it that I want to do? And at that moment in time, I was actually in a senior advisor position. I kind of come out of my HR role for a little bit. I was actually in like I said, an advisory position. And I really started to enjoy that line of work. Being a subject matter expert, advising these senior leaders, and also I was spending a lot of time working with individuals on performance goals, performance measures, and then they were going through specific challenges in their lives, and I was helping them through problem solving and overcoming those barriers and obstacles. And so I was trying to think about it and say, how can I do this later? Because I enjoy this so much. I was like, what is the job that I can do? And so I started thinking about counseling, and I was like, well, I kind of don't want to go through that process, and then I ran across Liberty University, and they had a program called, it was a Master's of Human Services Counseling, and they had a specific track for life coaching. And so I started to jump into that, and I would say about halfway through, not even halfway through, probably a quarter way through my coursework, you kind of get all your foundational counseling classes, and we started doing the coaching piece, and really started really understanding what coaching was. And I was just like, wow, I was like, this is awesome. And so 6 months later, I just said, you know what? I'm not even through my master's yet, but I want to start coaching now. And I jumped in. I will tell you, when I got into that program, I enjoyed the research and the work and that program so much. That was the best grade I'd ever gotten through anything. I mean, I was just so immersed in that training and what the things that they were offering that I just couldn't get enough of it. And I knew at that moment, this is what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I totally can hear that, and I can hear the conviction when you talk about that. And I find that true for most coaches. If you don't have that, you're not doing it.
Yeah.
So, what is it? How did you pick on focusing on men in particular, moving them forward?
Yeah, so this is an interesting conversation because I grew up without a father, and so the first 3 or 4 years I was coaching, I was kind of a little bit scared to kind of go into this category and kind of tell that story. You kind of have to get through some of that stuff, and when I went through my counseling program, I had to unpack a lot of that stuff because any good coaching program is going to ask you to kind of unpack the things and treat yourself as the client. You have to be very self-aware because you don't want to put your agenda onto other people. And so, or your principles or your values, because everybody grew up in a different situation, and it's more about understanding and pulling the information out of them because the client really knows the answer to the question. We're just trying to pull it out, even if it's at a deeper level of consciousness. And so that's what really coaching was about. And so as I was to do that, or I was doing that myself, working with my instructors, I realized that I really had a passion for this, and I kind of wanted to help solve this problem. And one of the things I ran across was a guy from his name was Michael White. He was from Australia, and he came up with this technique in Australia probably about 40, 50 years ago. It was called narrative therapy. It was developed, I think, in the 70s. And it's just reframing the mind or your story to where you become the hero of the story rather than the victim. And they had done this with several different groups of people with a lot of success. And it's rather than hearing the story that everybody's telling you, you tell it to where it empowers yourself and that you are stronger. You've overcome resiliency. You've, what I tell men is you're forged in character. Try to use that same language, like you're forged, you're built, to withstand, adversity. And so I start to use that. And I found that with that and focusing on positive psychology and character strengths, I thought there was something missing in this culture, especially when fatherless men, because I grew up in a fatherless home. I had 3 stepdads growing up, and none of them had much involvement in my upbringing, but I also don't even know who my biological father is. And so when I looked across, I was like, okay, what kind of data is there out there? And, what kind of help do these folks really need? There's 19.7 million children in the United States that go to home without a father there. And so when you look across the spectrum of all the societal problems that we have today, fatherless is the most common factor in every single one of those, to include the thing that is really destroying our nation right now, and that's mass shootings. And they found that most mass shootings are from kids who grew up in fatherless homes. Most suicides of child suicides or adult suicides of men are because they grew up in fatherless homes. A majority of the men that are in prison are from fatherless homes, so I mean, it just keeps going and going. Teen pregnancy, it's just everything that you can see that's challenging our nation today. The common factor is fatherless homes. And so I wanted to kind of really get after that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with these guys, because I look at myself, and I'm like, okay, well, I overcame those challenges and those barriers, and I became pretty successful. I did 23 years in the Army. I'm a coach now. I got a large family. I got 4 kids, 1 on the way that's due in January. So, I mean, I'm doing well, even though I had my mistakes as I went through, and I kind of had to learn the hard way, the hard knocks way, but I figured it out. And I was like, okay, well, how can I empower more of these men to do good in the world instead of, finding themselves in a challenging position like, prison, depression, anxiety, suicide. So how do we get after this thing before we get to that point? How can we work with young professionals, emerging leaders, and get to them before, this happens, and, and set them on the right path? And that's kind of what my mission's about and why I wanted to do this, because I felt like we were leaving a group of people behind.
Yeah. I hear that. And what's interesting, I am fortunate enough to have a stepfather that was very involved and like constant since I was 5. My parents got married. I didn't know my father also, my biological father, and I keep debating whether or not I do want to know him.
Yeah.
So I go back and forth on that whole like, do I
Yeah.
want to? Especially now I'm going nomadic, and I will be like where his last known places are. So it's been one of those like, oh, do I want to know? And I go back and forth. But I was fortunate enough to have a father in my life that has been there and constant and like yells at me because I don't call him enough. And like
That's a
now that
good
my
thing.
parents are separated, it's still I'm we all it doesn't matter. So and I know that it's challenging for people that haven't.
Yeah.
I've been around people, so I
Yeah.
really admire the work that you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And fatherless it's really encompassing. It's just not that you don't know who your biological father is. I mean, I know many men who know who their biological father is. They grew up with their biological father.
Hmm.
It's just you don't have that healthy, supportive relationship with a male figure in your life. And so, like, there's a story of a young man I worked with, and he had a wife and a couple children, and he told the story quite often that he felt there was something missing and he was struggling with his relationship with his father, and his father was getting older and was less mobile, but he said his dad was a great guy. He
Hmm.
constantly volunteered in the community, was a t-ball instructor, not t-ball instructor, but a little league instructor. He was very active in the church, but he was
Yeah.
never at home and he never engaged his children. He was so busy serving the community he forgot to serve his own family. And I don't know if he forgot. Maybe he had a challenging father figure, or childhood, and he just didn't learn that healthy behavior. And
Hmm.
so, but that's why I tell a lot of fathers, they're like, "Well, I don't know how to be a father." Well, being a parent is an entrepreneurial journey as well, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't know how to do it, but you learn quickly how to figure it out. We don't know what the baby's saying to us when they're crying, but we try different things until we figure out what works. And then, eventually you recognize certain cries and certain wants and certain needs. And so you have to be able to be in that learning mindset and that growth mindset. And so, like I said, I really find nothing wrong with these folks. It's just that we have to get them in the right frame of mind and change the narrative of their story to where, there's this deep wound and there's this void in their life. But really, there's nothing missing. It's just that they have to change how they perceive it rather than becoming the victim of the circumstance that they found themselves in, how they are stronger because of it.
Yeah. Do you find that a lot of times men have been conditioned that they have to provide for their family and be the person in the community and haven't really learned, that whole um it's not stress that they need to be home
Yeah.
and they need to be in that space.
Yeah, there's a lot of emotional labor that goes into this, and emotional labor is really um, things that I would say, and when it comes to workplace, the description is your job description, right? And there's a
Hmm.
lot of things that we do outside of our job description, and not that in any marriage, there's always roles and responsibilities that we have, and we've moved away from a lot of the traditional stuff because there's a lot of stay-at-home dads now, but
Yeah.
there's just this a lot of emotional labor that weighs on men, and they feel like they have to do more. And it's more, and they have to protect, and they have to provide, and they have to do all these things. And that is a huge weight on a lot of guys, and we just have to be able to say, let it go,
Hmm.
let that come off our shoulders and be okay with the way things are and moving forward. And as long as we're making progress, right, that it doesn't matter. I mean, it's just, we got to continue to move forward. And so, yeah, it is a lot of emotional labor that rests on the men's shoulders, and they just have to be okay with the way things are happening.
Yeah. Have you found that it's difficult for men to open up about these things because the society tells us that we need to man up?
Yeah. So yeah, there's a couple different ways that conversation can go, especially when people use the term "man up." And I can see a positive side of it, but then there's also a negative aspect of it. And so we have to be very careful, right, when people use that. It's kind of like cowboy up, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you take in that frame of mind, you know, when things need to happen, you know, you you empower yourself, you get strong, you get courageous, you do the things that you need to do, and that's really what it's designed to be. But then there's this toxic side of it, and we kind of have to shut the door on the toxic side of it. We have to push that back. And so, but yeah, there is a huge challenge in our society today about, you know, um manning up, you know, and what that means. And a lot of society perceives that as a toxic or a negative aspect of men's lives, and it can be. But that's kind of where we're coming in now, in my programs and stuff, and I'm trying to educate men that there is a toxic masculinity that's out there. But instead of focusing on the negative and constantly trying to push people down, don't give it no attention. Smoke it out, stifle it, you know, by not giving it energy and attention, and focus on the positive things, the good things, you know, what's right with men, and build on those. That way we promote that type of behavior rather than put a spotlight on the negative behavior all the time. And so
Yeah.
it's really just directing our attention.
Yeah, because whatever you focus on expands,
Right.
you know.
And so that's what we want to do. We want to expand on the positive things and promote the good things that men are doing rather than kind of, you know, and I find that a lot of times is some guys just feel beat down. They feel beat down by the media. They feel beat down by other folks. And, you know, they're afraid to say anything because they're afraid of the repercussions. You know, you're not sensitive enough, you're not this, you're not that. But I know a lot of guys that cry. I mean, it's not about that. It's just there's a moment in time for everybody, but we're not all going to fit into the same mold. And
Right.
being an individual is okay. Being unique is okay, because not one of us, I think it's like the statistics are like 1 in a trillion or more than that, probably. I think it is. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but that somebody's going to be exactly like you. And that's
Yeah.
the odds are against you, right? And so we're all built differently, and we have to accept each other for our unique traits and capabilities.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, I just think that we don't have that conversation enough,
Yeah.
that we are unique, and each person is an individual.
Yeah.
And what does that look like for you? So how do you bring that out in people? How do you learn? How do you change that conversation with an individual?
Yeah, so what I do is I try to leverage strengths. So there's a few different strength reports out there. You know, you've probably heard a lot of them, like Myers-Briggs, Strengths 2.0. I have a fondness for character strengths, which is by the VIA Institute. And I like to use those things like love of learning, compassion, purpose, meaningful living, things like that, to kind of really show you what are your top 5 strengths. And sometimes these top 5 strengths are blind strengths, really.
Yeah.
And what that means is they're so strong within you that sometimes they can provide a negative aspect. So if I was my top strength is focus, right? So sometimes I get so focused that I don't see what's going on around me. That can have a negative aspect to it. And so if I can't see what's going on around me, I might be missing things because I'm so hyper focused. And so that's what is bringing it back down. Like love of learning is one of my top 5 strengths, but I have to control that because I'll get so deep into learning that I'm just collecting information, you know, and I'm just learning, and never executing or putting the learning into practice. And so that can, you know, I can be a negative side to that. And I just have to be able to learn how to balance that, or, you know, kind of tailor that back. Now, these are all strengths. And so that goes back to, you know, what I said earlier is what's right with men, because when we focus on strengths, they're strengths. And just because your strength, maybe when you take one of these reports, like number 25, doesn't mean it's a weakness. It just means that you just don't use it as much. And so the example that I like to use quite a bit is, say I'm an introvert, right? And to get up on stage and speak in front of a group of people takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of energy for me to do that. While an extrovert, it may be easy. They can get up there and they can just do it without any preparation. They probably don't get butterflies in their stomach. They don't get nervous, the sweaty palms. They can just get up there and do it. And so that's the difference is that an introvert may need to use a lot more courage to kind of, and energy to kind of get up there, while an extrovert may not. And so an introvert courage may be, at the, high because they're constantly using it, while an extrovert courage may be low. It doesn't mean that you have any more courage or less courage. It just means that the amount that you have to rely on and tap into is a little bit different. But we all have the strength courage. There's probably been times where you've had to use your courage, and you may have to step up and say something to somebody, or maybe there's a difficult conversation you're having at work and you have to drum up some courage, and it may took you a week to have that conversation because you had a little bit of anxiety. And so that's what we do is we work through those areas and those strengths and use it to leverage, better performance and better relationships in men's lives.
Yeah, I definitely. And it's funny because people think that I'm an extrovert and really I'm introverted, but I can do a stage, no problem. This is challenging for me.
Yeah.
This one-on-one conversation.
Yeah. So I've met a lot of introverts that are excellent speakers. They're phenomenal. They're just really good because, and here's the thing, it's not that the extroverts don't care so much, but the introverts, they're so worried and they care so much about it that the preparation and all of the stuff that goes into it is really so hyper focused and driven that when they get up there, they do a great job. I mean, they stop focusing so much, on all the aesthetics, and they really just focus on delivering the content. So
yeah, it's always a funny thing when people go, well, you're so extroverted, and I'm like, no, this is like almost impossible for me. And Facebook Lives, that's always the fun. It's always a fun one because I do a lot of them, and it's like, no, that's not fun for me. that's a challenge. But what do you feel like the conversation is that men need to just give up?
That's a good question. I don't know if there's a conversation that we need to give up. And so this is what I would say to that question is maybe that conversation isn't now, maybe later. And so depending on, the context of the question, whether it's a relationship or just a general conversation, with society, there's a good time for every conversation, and we just have to decide when that is. And one of the things, I was just recently at a conference, the Military Influencer Conference, and one of the things that I would say for men in general, right, and fatherless men too, is I was listening to a Medal of Honor speaker at this conference, and one of the things he said was, together we have a stronger voice, or a strong voice. And he talked about community, and he goes, as a community, we have a strong voice. And so, and I would say together we can make an impact that can change the world. And so when you think about that, when you think about community, I think that's the real conversation that we have to have is the community. It's the tribe. It's all those things. It's coming together as one to make men's lives better. And especially in my category, when I'm working with fatherless men, they need to come together. And that's the biggest challenge that I've seen with men is that we're so isolated, and we have such a hard time with vulnerability that it's scary. It's a scary place to be.
Yeah, definitely. I know that in my experience, it's hard. That's the first thing that goes is the community. Like, no, I need to do this all by myself.
Yeah.
And not reaching out. So.
And I love community because, being an entrepreneur here, and I can get lost in the office all day long and not seeing anybody, and constantly working social media programs, doing one-on-one coaching. And then I just don't, it's very difficult to get out there and have community. And so I have to make it very intentional to get out and get into groups and join clubs and do this and do that in order to be a part of a community, or else you can tell. I mean, you can tell the difference when I'm involved in community and when I'm not. and I'm a better person when I'm a part of a community. And it's extremely important in our society. Even if you go back to the beginning of time, people were a part of communities. And that's how they survived, and that's how the human race has kind of evolved over time too, is because of community, people working together as one to do something great and to build and empower. And so that's, it's, you can kind of look back through history and see how it worked. And I mean, the larger the population, the more ideas and information and things, inventions and stuff like that came about. And so as an individuals, our work is very challenging, but when we work as a community, as a group, we're able to do more.
Yeah. Do you find that social media helps or hinders that?
It just depends. I mean, if technology can be leveraged to do good in the world and can be a beneficial factor for most people, but I think we're at a point to where the social marketing or the psychological marketing that we're using is probably doing more harm than good. So, for example, the dings and the dongs and all the other things that go off on your phone, that's psychology, and that's used to get your attention and keep you picking up your phone. So one of the things I like about iPhone is that, and that what they did with the technology is they actually give you a weekly report. It shows up how many times you picked up your phone a day and how many
Oh, wow.
notifications you got. And so I use that. I'm like, wow, I need to turn notifications off on this because I'm spending too much time here. This is not the best use of my time. And so you can use technology to kind of leverage things and do good, but it also can be used to do bad. So one of the things that I like about technology is that I can do group coaching or masterminds online.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to be in the same room or the same community. You can create online community. And I think a lot of online communities have done a lot of positive things in our world. And like Ryan Mitzler, who's one of the guys that has created this huge men's group, has done a lot of great things for men on that side of the house. And like I said, it can be a really positive thing. And that's why Facebook groups and some of these other networks, like LinkedIn groups and some of these other are so popular, is because people just want to be a part of the community. It's an intrinsic desire to feel that you belong. And that's what they want to be. They want to belong to something that they identify with and they're a part of. And that's what we do, is we're attracted to others like us.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the traps that we're dealing with right now, though, is that they think that clicking a button that says like is enough to be connected.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was working with a social media LinkedIn coach. His name was Teddy Burris. He's over there. Yeah, you can see him on LinkedIn. He's a great guy. I love him. Did a lot of volunteering and a lot of mentorship for veterans and stuff for a while. But he's one of the best LinkedIn coaches I've ever seen and had. And, just teaching me how to navigate that process. And one of the things that was mind blowing to me, which is probably not really that big of, it's kind of the small things that kind of blow your mind sometimes because you're too close to the problem. But he's like, Kirby, he's like, every time somebody likes a post, they're just passing by. They're like, hey, Kirby's a good guy. I'm going to like his post. Right. And I'm like, okay, that's great. And then he's like, if they comment, that means they read your post. Right. And they actually thought they had something to contribute to the discussion that you were having. And so we're creating these conversations online. So a comment means that they felt they had something of value to offer. Now, if they share your post, that means that, they felt that this conversation was so good and that it offered value to other people and that they wanted to share that. And so recently I've kind of entered into a pitch competition through Bunker Labs, which is a veterans organization about startups and incubators and accelerators. And it's just a normal pitch contest. And then what they do is as a like is a point, a comment's 2 points, and a share is 3, because the share is really important. It means that conversation is extremely important to that person that read that, and they felt like they should share it out to the rest of their community. And so, and that's kind of how the message spreads, right? Is when we begin to share. And so when something's that important to you, you want to share it with other people. And so it's important. And so that's kind of how I kind of see the social media a little bit as well, is the likes, the comments, and the shares. And I kind of put it in those 3 different categories. So it really depends on, the value you see in that conversation, because each post is its own conversation, and you can kind of see. That's why algorithms are kind of interesting. I know that they're tainted one way or the other, but the deep, strong conversations are the ones that constantly stay at the top of the feeds. And that's what is really important to people at that time. And that's something to pay attention to. And that kind of maybe goes back to our other question that you had is the conversations. What conversations do men just need to stop having? And, not that, they need to stop having it, but which ones are more important and which ones are engaging at the time. And so, watch the trends and watch them rise and fall and see where, things are at. Because social media can tell us a lot about what's going on in the world and how people feel. So
especially if you're like me and you've studied how to read the trends and actually how to fuse that for you, and so it's kind of fun to watch what is actually trending when you look at the conversations in general.
With social media, I would just caution against the screen addiction. I mean, you got to limit yourself. You got to be very intentional about what you do, and you just, if you find yourself on there all the time and you're not being productive. Now, part of my job is social media. That's part of my business, so I have to be on there a little bit.
Yeah.
But I have to be very, very intentional about when I am and when I'm not. And and that's the unfortunate part about social media is that it can put people in a box, and if they never get out of that box, you don't have new experiences, you don't grow, you don't venture out, and people become stuck. And I think it's really important to get out from behind the screen and let people know who you really are. Probably one of the best comments I had. I went to that military influencer conference I talked to you about, and I was walking through the hallway, and the director of the conference, the CEO of the conference, recognized me. He's about 10 paces behind me. He said, "Hey, Kirby," and I looked back, and there he was. And he's like, "How's it going?" And it's just a couple little things of small talk. And he's like, he goes, your presence or your appearance is the same as it is on social media. And so I was like, wow, that's a compliment. I've worked really hard on my brand and my presence on social media and how I, what I look like. And he's like, yeah, he goes, on the screen and off the screen, you're pretty much the same person. And so that's important, and making sure we're being very authentic while we're behind the screen.
Yeah. And I find that sometimes that's challenging, because you want to put out a image in this thing, and so that's one of the challenges that I found working with clients, more so than I'm me everywhere. I'm a little less. My mind stays out of the gutter on Facebook, so publicly there's things I don't post. But other than that, it's pretty true to form. So
it's tough. I mean, we want to put our best foot forward. We want to show people what's good about our life, and we should be celebrating those things. But there's also a part where we have to learn to kind of own the bad as well as the good. And not everything is perfect. And my daughter had a blow up today, and it was a bad day, and she stressed out, and she threw a terrible fit. And kind of made my day go south, and I just mess, I'm a mess all the rest of the day. It happens. It's okay to admit that, and say, today was just a tough day. Have that conversation. Be okay with that. Show the good as well as the bad, and be your true, authentic self, and if you're struggling, say, hey, I am struggling today, because there's a lot of people out there that want to help. And I don't, and I don't think that there's really, you're going to have people out there that do some bad things, but I think that's like a small group of people. And I don't think that people should be afraid of the, those types of consequences, because there's going to be more people that are, wanting you to succeed. I listened to Pat Flynn one time. He's Smart Passive Income. He has his own podcast as well. And he was doing a keynote, and he was telling us a story about how he had this bully online that was really just trying to destroy his brand, and it really threw him through a loop. And where he wasn't creating content or podcasts or anything like that for 30 days. It kind of like hit a nerve with him and kind of derailed his progress. And a friend had called him and talked to him, and kind of worked him through that process. But at the end of the day, it was his community that kind of surrounded him, and that kind of lifted him back up and kind of defeated this bully for him, and he had personal conversations with the guy, I guess, a couple times, and they kind of talked a little bit about why and what happened. But one of the interesting things is that this person that called him and got him kind of back on the rails again told him is that there's just one person that doesn't like you, so what? But there's hundreds of thousands of people that need you, that want you, that that say you are good enough and you have what it takes. And that's kind of what I tell these men, and that you have something of value that they desire. And if you don't show up, then you're keeping those people from that. You're taking that away from them. And so that kind of made him like, oh wow,
Mm-hmm.
if I don't go back online, if I don't do this, I'm doing more harm than I am good. And so you got to let that one person go, let them, don't give them that attention. I think there's a quote that says, I can't remember what it's called right off the top of my head, but it's something like, the lion doesn't look back at the dog barking, right? I mean, so why would you look back at the dog barking, right? The little dog barking at a big lion, you're bigger than that. You're stronger than that. Your voice is stronger than the person that's chirping and barking behind you. And so just let them go. Just let them have their fit or whatever it is they're going to do, and just continue to move on. And I block those people. I mean, I don't need that part of my life, so.
Yeah, I found in general, most people, I very rarely have somebody that says something super negative to the point where I have to block them. I think it's happened twice in my whole, and typically they're just ideology is completely opposed to anything that I could, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, okay, I see and hear who you are, and one of them hurt me really bad, because it was somebody that I've known for my whole life. And I'm like, you know what? I don't need that kind of toxicity. And
sometimes those people need help too. And that's what they're doing. They're crying out for help. They just need help. And it can be challenging. It can be a very, very challenging conversation. And you may not be the person that can help them, but at least you can start that conversation, right? And start them on that path down the right road. And so I mean, I think people, most people in this world, I would say a good majority are here to do good. They want to do good. They want to do great stuff. There's very few people, that, really there to do bad things. And would just get caught up. Right. And we don't recognize the good that we do, and I work with a lot of men on that too. I mean, I'm like, you have no idea, you might think that you're in this mediocre job doing this mediocre thing, but you have no idea the impact that you're having just by, coming to work every day and doing their job, and, trying to help them see the mission, see the bigger purpose of what they're doing and what they're providing. Because if you don't show up and do your job, something doesn't happen, and somebody has to do without that day. It's just the same thing. If I was worked on a garbage truck, or a sanitation company, and I didn't pick up the trash out of the street every day, that's a very purposeful, meaningful job that keeps our communities clean. And so a lot of people may not have a lot of respect for folks like that, but they're doing a very purposeful, meaningful job that makes all of our lives easier, and we should respect them and have, a lot of admiration for what they do, because they actually perform that job. One of the guys I like to watch a little bit on TV when I do get time to watch TV is Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs. And so he shows people, like, I'm like, wow, I would never want to do that job. I have a lot more appreciation for this guy because I didn't want to do that, so, but I mean, I have worked on farms and stuff when I was growing up as a kid, so I know what it's like to do some very difficult, dirty jobs. And I appreciate that work, and I think that can build a sense of work ethic, and desire, to create something, and that's what I think we have to get back to knowing is our ability to work is an intrinsic desire to create. So
Yeah.
something meaningful in our lives.
Yeah, and it's funny because I grew up in restaurants. So like I worked for a corporate restaurant for 20 years. It was and did other restaurants throughout the whole thing. It was weird. But one of the things I found out is that those skills translate. And so when I started really mentoring people, I'm like, so what do you really want to do? So this might not be what you want to do.
Uh-huh.
So what do you really want to do? Let me give you those skills and like really focus on those skills and, you know, make sure that you can move to the next level. And most of the people that have worked with me have now, like, I was coaching way back then, but most of the people that work with me now say, you know, oh goodness, that's the biggest thing that's ever happened to me, and you know, you've put me on the right path on this and that and this, and it's just craziness because you don't think about working in a restaurant as part of, you know, the community at large, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter which job. I mean, I worked restaurant jobs too. I mean, I did a lot of different stuff, and you know, you can learn skills and behaviors, and whether it's hard skills or soft skills in any job, and those can translate to other positions. You know, you just might have to do this thing for a little bit, and you know, take a few knocks on the head, or you know, learn, you know, go through a few repetitions before you're ready to move on to the next thing. And so, you know, I'd like to tell people, you know, you're not going to go from zero to hero overnight, right? There's very few overnight successes.
Right.
You know, most multimillionaires are going to tell you that, you know, one day they showed up in the news media and it took off. But there were years and years and years of hard work that led up to that moment that nobody else saw until they get to tell their story. And, you know, it's just, it's almost like some of the shows like American Idol and America's Got Talent. Those people worked and worked and worked at that talent in order to get to that moment, and they finally got an opportunity, and they killed it. They killed it there, and they nailed it, and they did exactly what they needed to do, and now they're successful. And I mean, there's just some extremely talented people out there, and they've worked hard their whole life. And it's building blocks, you know, and it's waiting for that right opportunity. And when it hits, you got to be ready. You know, you got to be prepared.
Yeah. So if there's one thing that you want to leave people with today, what would that be?
Yeah. So if I was, you know, just to talk to the community a little bit, you know, just understand that you are good enough and you do have what it takes. And so don't give up, right? You know, there's a saying that I like to use quite a bit, and that is that, and I just posted it again the other day. Failure is not failure if you're growing from the failure, right? And so if you never quit, you don't fail. And so don't give up on your dreams. You know, a lot of us have grown up and we thought, I'm going to be this or I'm going to be that, you know, and then, you know, we go through school, and school kind of teaches you how to, you know, be a producer, right? So, you know, rinse and repeat, you know, you do a certain task over and over and over and over and over. And sometimes our creativity may have been stifled a little bit. But if there was something that you really, really wanted to do, I challenge you to go out and pursue that. Maybe that's coaching that helps you. Maybe you go out and you purchase a course or something like that. But we all have an intrinsic desire to create, and you can do that. And you can still do those things that your heart was set on. And I believe a lot of people still have a desire to do some of those things they wanted to do when they were younger. Some of us wanted to be, my son right now wants to be an astronaut, you know, and that's probably, I mean, it's realistic, but we have to think about the expectations, you know, and so that was something that he probably has to chart his path now. The year before, he wanted to be a pizza maker. And I tried to convince him, well, maybe we're going to be an entrepreneur that sells pizzas. So, and so let's try to think of it a different way, you know, and reframe this a little bit. But I mean, you have an intrinsic desire to create, so don't give up on your dreams. Continue to pursue those things, and you know, just remember that you are good enough and you have what it takes. And we do have a lot of self-limiting thoughts that prevent us from pursuing those dreams. And just understand that just because you fail doesn't mean that's the end of the day. It's just a stepping stone to success.
Yeah. I completely agree. Well, thank you so much, Kirby. Where could people find you?
Yeah, so the easiest place is to go to www.kirbyingles.com, and it's just my first and last name. I'm also on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook, and you can find me on all those. And I'm probably one of the very few Kirby Ingles out there. A very unique name,
Yeah.
and so I think there might be maybe 2 in the world right now. I'm not sure. I haven't looked in a while, but all you got to do is type in the search box. I'm probably going to pop up. So
Awesome. And I will have links in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here today, Kirby. I so appreciate who you are and what you're giving to the world and the energy that you have for people and really working with people that are kind of forgotten in a lot of ways, so thank you so much. And I look forward to talking to you soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you know that I have a podcast called The Creative Nomad? Check it out at thecreativenomadshow.com. And please like, subscribe, ring the bell, and share. Check out True Awesome Clothing Company at facebook.com/trueawesomeclothes. And know that each and every one of you are loved. I'll see you next time.